Calling all music teachers. On this program, I specifically want to look at some more of the advantages of Gabriel notation over traditional notation. And I want to look at the C major scale, the C sharp major scale, and the D flat major scale. And there's some very interesting comparisons. And I'm sure you will find it is much easier for your students to learn one 12-tone chromatic scale that repeats throughout the staff in both the treble and bass clefs than it is to teach the outdated system which we know as traditional notation. The C major scale is really the only scale where Gabriel notation does not have a tremendous advantage over traditional notation. And that's because traditional notation is built entirely around the C major scale. In other words, the white keys on a keyboard. However, there is one advantage, and that is because the intervals are correct in Gabriel notation, whereas they are not correct because all the intervals look the same in standard notation, whereas in my system you understand that the first three notes of the scale have a whole step in between, whereas between the E and the F there is only a half a step, and at the end of the octave there's only a half a step, and that is shown in the placement of the notes. So let's review the fingering for the C major scale. And of course, we start with C, with the C major scale, with the thumb, the first finger, second finger, the third finger, and then thumb under for the F, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then coming down, we reverse course, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Third finger over for the E, 3, 2, 1. And now the bass clef. The fifth finger, the little finger, starts with the C, C, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Third finger over for the A, 3, 2, 1. And of course, reverse to go back down the scale. 1, 2, 3, thumb under, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now what's interesting is to look at the next scale, which is the C sharp major scale. So let's bring in the standard notation for the C sharp major scale. And you'll see that the notes are in the same position on standard notation, identical. And notice, by the way, that the location is different from the treble clef to the bass clef. I should have mentioned that's one more advantage to Gabriel notation. But the thing is that none of these notes are in the same position as these notes as far as playing goes. You have to remember, because of the 7 sharps in the key signature, that every one of these notes is different. Of course, with Gabriel notation, there is no such problem because the notes are in the same position on the staff as on the keyboard. In other words, the C sharp major scale looks like this, and with traditional notation, it is not accurate. It's much more difficult to read. That's why you hardly ever find music printed in this scale. There's no reason for it not to be that way. C sharp major does not sound worse than C major scale. The only thing is it's more difficult to read. So let's try the fingering for the C sharp major scale. And we start with C sharp, of course, with the second finger, 2, 3, thumb under for the F, even though notice over here it looks like E sharp, which it is, but the actual note you play is the F, which is correctly notated in Gabriel notation. 1, 2, 3, 4. Thumb under to the C, which is actually B sharp. 1, 2. And then coming back down for the reverse, 2, 1, fourth finger over. This is a little more difficult. 4, 3, 2, 1, 3, 2. And the bass clef, we start with a 3, third finger on C sharp. 3, 2, 1, fourth finger over. 4, 3, 2, 1, 3. And the reverse going back. 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. Now we're going to look at a very interesting scale, and that is the D flat major scale. It's interesting that now we find in traditional notation a different set of notes, D, E, F, G, as far as the scale printed goes. But again, you do not play any of those notes because they are all flatted. And yet, the D flat major scale plays exactly the same as the C sharp major scale in Gabriel notation. And in fact, in either way, whether you're reading traditional notation or Gabriel notation, it's just that with traditional notation, you have to remember to flatten these notes, or if you're reading this scale, to sharpen the notes. Let's take a look at Gabriel notation, which is much easier. And I'll put D flat on the left and the scale on the right. And there's really no sense for me to play it because it's identical. Notice how these two scales are identical in Gabriel notation. D flat major, the only difference is that the shape of the flat notes is a little different than the sharp notes, but the scale is identical, as you can see. Going up the scale, the white notes are in the same position, the black notes are in their same position. The white notes are modified slightly to show that it is a flat. In the C sharp major, it looks like a sharp. But as you can see on a piano, it really doesn't matter which you play, and it is much easier to play than traditional notation, in which you have to remember to either flatten the notes or sharpen each note, as with the C sharp major scale. So I think the advantage of Gabriel notation is becoming clearer each scale that we talk about on this program. So I'm sure all you music teachers know full well that the C sharp major scale in 7 sharps is played identically on the piano to the D flat major scale with 5 flats. You play the exact same notes. Why aren't they notated the same? Why are they notated in traditional notation as the C major scale with all kinds of sharp and flat modifications, especially in the key signature? Any student? And I know I was a piano student for many years as a very young person, probably the ages of 8 to 10. It was very difficult for me to go from 0 sharps and flats in the C major scale all the way up to 6 and 7 sharps and flats. It's totally unnecessary. You only need to learn 12 note and staff conjunctions for the 7 white keys and the 5 black keys. Please try out my system. Go to my website, thirdeaglemedia.com, download these scales, or eventually all the scales I will have available for you to study, for you to look over. See if you don't agree with me that Gabriel notation is far superior.